The countdown clock behind the stage showed 3 minutes. Outside, more than 50,000 people screamed a single name so loudly that the steel beams of the arena seemed to vibrate beneath their voices. Elvis! 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 Spotlights swept across the roaring crowd like giant waves of light. Television cameras rolled. Journalists adjusted their microphones. Promoters smiled nervously, convinced they were about to witness another legendary performance from the biggest star on Earth. Backstage, musicians waited with instruments in hand. The drummer tapped his sticks against his leg. The guitarist checked his strings for the last time. The orchestra director raised his hand. Everyone waited for the familiar sound of Elvis Presley's boots walking toward the curtain. But those footsteps never came. Because at that exact moment, Elvis Presley was running in the opposite direction. Not toward the stage, not toward the cheering crowd, but toward a storm that seemed determined to swallow the city whole. The rain had started less than an hour earlier. Now it looked like the sky itself had broken apart. Thunder cracked across Memphis with enough force to shake windows for blocks. Lightning flashed so often that night briefly became day before collapsing back into darkness. Water rushed through the streets like wild rivers. Cars crawled through flooded intersections. People ran beneath storefront awnings. Police officers struggled to direct traffic. Nobody imagined that history was about to change on one forgotten street corner. Inside a long black limousine, Elvis sat unusually quiet. He wore the famous white concert jumpsuit that millions recognized instantly. Golden embroidery shimmered whenever lightning flashed through the windows. His cape rested beside him. The arena was only minutes away. His manager, Colonel Parker, kept checking his watch every few seconds. "We are cutting it close." Another glance. "They've already announced your arrival." Another glance. "The audience is getting impatient." Elvis didn't answer. Instead, he stared through the rain-covered window. There was something about that storm. Something heavy. Something impossible to explain. As if the night itself were trying to tell him something. He rubbed the silver cross hanging beneath his shirt. He had learned long ago to trust certain feelings. Feelings that arrived without warning. Feelings that had no explanation. Sometimes they disappeared. Sometimes they changed lives. Then he saw them. At first, only shadows. Several people standing in the rain. Nobody moving. Nobody kneeling. Nobody helping. The limousine rolled closer. The headlights illuminated the scene. A young girl lay motionless on the soaked pavement. Her long hair was tangled with rainwater. Blood mixed with the flowing water around her. One shoe had fallen several feet away. Her small hand twitched once, then became still. People simply watched. One woman covered her mouth. A man kept repeating, "I don't want to touch her. What if she's already?" Nobody finished the sentence. Elvis suddenly leaned forward. "Stop the car." The driver hesitated. "Sir, we are almost." "I said stop." The limousine screeched to a halt. Before anyone could react, Elvis threw open the door. Cold rain instantly drenched him. Colonel Parker shouted from inside the car, "Elvis!" But he was already running. Water splashed beneath every step. The expensive leather boots disappeared beneath muddy floodwater. His perfectly prepared concert outfit was soaked within seconds. He didn't care. He dropped to his knees beside the girl. She couldn't have been older than 16. Her face was pale. Her lips had almost no color. Her breathing barely existed. Elvis gently brushed wet hair away from her forehead. Her skin felt frighteningly cold. "Can you hear me?" No response. He looked around. "What happened?" An older man finally answered. "A truck lost control. It happened so fast. We already called an ambulance." "When?" "About 10 minutes ago." Elvis looked down the empty street. No sirens. No flashing lights. Nothing. Every second mattered. He knew it. Everyone knew it. But nobody moved. Except him. Without another word, Elvis carefully slid one arm beneath the girl's shoulders and the other beneath her legs. She weighed almost nothing. Her head rested against his chest. Rain continued pouring over both of them. The crowd around them gasped. One teenager whispered in disbelief, "Is that really Elvis Presley?" Another answered, "He's carrying her." Camera flashes exploded from somewhere nearby. Reporters hadn't even reached the concert. Yet history had already found them. Colonel Parker came running through the rain. His face was filled with panic. "What are you doing?" Elvis ignored him. "We have to get her to a hospital. The ambulance is coming. We don't have time." Colonel grabbed Elvis by the arm. "You don't understand." "No, you don't understand. There are more than 50,000 people waiting. This concert has been planned for months. Television networks are live. Millions are watching. If you leave now." Elvis slowly turned toward him. Rain streamed down his face. His blue eyes had never looked more serious. "If that girl dies while I'm singing." He paused. "Then every applause tonight would sound like a funeral." Silence. Even the storm seemed quieter. Colonel released his arm. Elvis carried the unconscious girl back toward the limousine. The driver immediately opened the rear door. The white leather seats were ruined within seconds by rainwater and blood. Nobody cared. Elvis laid the girl across his lap. "Memphis City Hospital." The driver hesitated. "The arena is only." "Hospital." The single word ended the conversation. The limousine accelerated through flooded streets. Behind them, the arena lights continued shining. Inside, 50,000 people kept chanting Elvis's name. None of them knew. Their hero wasn't coming. Not yet. Backstage, confusion spread like wildfire. The orchestra checked the clock again. The opening announcement had already finished. Technicians whispered to each other. "Where is he?" No one knows. They've lost radio contact. Producers stared nervously toward the entrance. Television hosts smiled awkwardly into cameras. "We're expecting Elvis Presley to appear at any moment." But those moments kept passing. 1 minute. 2 minutes. 5 minutes. The cheering slowly transformed into restless murmurs. Nobody understood. Not even the people closest to him. The limousine raced through red lights. Police escorts cleared flooded intersections. Rain slammed against the windshield so hard that visibility almost disappeared. Inside the car, Elvis supported the girl's head with one hand. His other hand searched desperately for a pulse. Weak. Almost impossible to feel. He leaned closer. "Stay with me. You hear me? Stay with me." For the briefest moment, her eyelids moved. Barely. almost imperceptibly. Her lips trembled. A single word escaped. "Dad." Elvis froze. He looked down at her. Did she really say that? Or had the storm distorted the sound? Before he could think further, she lost consciousness again. His heartbeat became louder than the thunder outside. Something inside him shifted. Something ancient. Something buried. Something he could neither explain nor ignore. The emergency entrance doors burst open. Doctors looked up. Nurses stopped walking. Wheelchairs froze in place. Patients turned toward the entrance. And then they saw him, the most famous man in America, standing completely soaked, his legendary white jumpsuit stained with rain, mud, and blood, holding an unconscious teenage girl in his arms. For several endless seconds, no one moved. No one spoke. The entire emergency department stood frozen. Not because Elvis Presley had entered, but because the fear on his face was unlike anything they had ever seen. The king of rock and roll wasn't asking for applause. He wasn't asking for attention. He wasn't even asking people to recognize him. His voice cracked with desperation as he looked directly at the nearest doctor. "Please," he whispered, "save her." And at that exact moment, no one inside that hospital could have imagined that before sunrise, one sentence would force Elvis Presley to confront a secret buried for almost 2 decades. A secret capable of rewriting not only his own life, but the story an entire nation believed about its greatest icon. The emergency room fell into a silence so complete that even the relentless storm outside seemed to disappear. Only one sound remained: the steady, mechanical rhythm of a heart monitor struggling to keep a fragile life alive. Beep. A pause. Beep. Another pause. Every second felt longer than the last. Elvis Presley stood outside the operating room, drenched from head to toe. Water dripped from the sleeves of his white jumpsuit, mixing with the crimson stains on his hands. For the first time in years, he was completely unaware of cameras, reporters, concerts, or fame. Nothing in the world mattered, except the young girl lying behind those swinging doors. Minutes earlier, she had been a stranger. Now, he could not explain why, but it felt as though losing her would tear away a part of himself that he had never known existed. The hallway lights flickered once as thunder rolled across Memphis. Doctors hurried in and out of the operating room, speaking in urgent whispers. Nurses rushed between supply rooms, carrying blood bags, medical instruments, and stacks of paperwork. Nobody looked relaxed. Nobody smiled. The atmosphere carried the unmistakable weight of a race against death. Across the hall, Colonel Parker finally caught up. His expensive suit was soaked, his hair plastered to his forehead. He looked exhausted. "Elvis." No answer. The arena is in chaos. Still nothing. They've delayed the show. Silence. Reporters are asking questions. Elvis slowly turned. His blue eyes looked different. Not angry. Not frightened. Simply distant. "If I had stayed," he said quietly, "she would already be dead." Colonel lowered his head. There was nothing he could say. For the first time in all the years they had worked together, he realized the concert no longer existed in Elvis's mind. Only the girl did. Inside the operating room, the surgeons fought desperately. "Pressure is dropping. Prepare another unit. She's losing too much blood." A young nurse looked toward the blood bank report, and felt her stomach tighten. There isn't any left. The room froze. What? We've checked every hospital in Memphis. Nothing. Call Nashville. They already answered. Jackson. No match. The chief surgeon closed his eyes for one brief second. Rare blood types were already difficult to find. But this one was almost impossible. Without compatible blood, the operation would fail. Outside, a nurse suddenly rushed toward Elvis. Mr. Presley. He stood immediately. The chief doctor needs you. Without asking another question, Elvis followed her down the hallway. They entered a small consultation room. The chief physician closed the door. He looked unusually serious. On the desk lay several laboratory reports. Beside them, a single blood sample. The doctor took a slow breath. We've identified her blood type. Elvis nodded. And the doctor hesitated. It is one of the rarest genetic combinations we have ever encountered. He slid one report across the table. We compared it against every available emergency donor. Another pause. There were no matches. Elvis looked down. What does that mean? The doctor's voice became quieter. It means she will not survive unless we find someone with identical genetic markers. Silence settled over the room. Then the doctor reached for another folder. This, he said, is your medical file. Elvis frowned. My file. You donated blood after a charity accident several years ago. I remember. We still had your records. The doctor slowly placed both laboratory reports side by side. One belonged to the unconscious girl. The other belonged to Elvis Presley. Every number, every marker, every rare genetic signature matched perfectly. The room became impossibly still. Elvis stared at the papers. His fingers tightened around the edge of the desk. There has to be some mistake. We checked 3 times. No. We checked 4. The doctor looked directly into Elvis's eyes. We have never seen a match this precise. The words echoed inside Elvis's mind. Impossible. There were millions of people in America. Millions. Yet somehow, his blood was the only blood capable of saving hers. Within minutes, nurses prepared the transfusion room. Without hesitation, Elvis rolled up his sleeve. No contracts. No publicity. No cameras. No speeches. Just one sentence. Take whatever she needs. The needle slid into his arm. Dark red blood began flowing through the clear tubing. On the opposite side of the room, another tube carried that same blood into the unconscious girl. Neither of them moved. One giving life, the other fighting to hold onto it. Time seemed suspended. As the transfusion continued, the heart monitor inside the operating room changed. The weak rhythm became steadier. Beep. A little stronger. Beep. Another improvement. Doctors exchanged cautious glances. For the first time all night, hope appeared. Nearly an hour later, the transfusion ended. Elvis sat quietly, slightly pale, but refusing to rest. He never once asked how much blood had been taken. He asked only one question. Is she alive? The doctor smiled for the first time that evening. Yes. A long breath escaped Elvis's chest. But the doctor's smile disappeared almost immediately. There is something else. Those 4 words changed everything. The chief physician opened another sealed envelope. Unlike the previous reports, this one contained photographs. Old photographs, yellowed by time, carefully preserved. He placed the first picture on the table. It showed a young woman standing outside a small church in Memphis nearly 2 decades earlier. She was smiling. Standing beside her was a much younger Elvis Presley. His hair was darker, his face thinner, his smile unmistakable. Elvis felt the color drain from his face. He had not seen that photograph in years. "Where did you get this?" The doctor didn't answer immediately. Instead, he revealed a second photograph. The same woman, holding a newborn baby wrapped in a pale pink blanket. The baby's tiny hand rested against a small silver pendant shaped like a guitar pick. Elvis's breathing stopped. He recognized the pendant instantly. There had only ever been one like it. He had given it away himself, years ago, to someone he believed he would never see again. His hands began to tremble. "This," he whispered, "can't be." The doctor looked at him with unmistakable concern. "We found these photographs inside the girl's backpack." Elvis slowly lifted the final item from the envelope. It wasn't another photograph. It was a faded letter. The envelope had never been opened. Across the front, written in elegant handwriting, were only 6 words. "To Elvis, if we never meet again." His heartbeat pounded so loudly that he barely heard the doctor's next sentence. "We believe this young woman has been carrying this letter for many years." Elvis could hardly breathe. His fingers hovered above the envelope. He wanted to open it. He was terrified to open it, because somewhere deep inside, a memory he had buried for almost 2 decades was beginning to awaken. And for the first time in his life, Elvis feared that the greatest secret of his past had been waiting for him. Not on a concert stage, not in front of millions of fans, but inside a rain-soaked backpack carried by an unconscious girl who had whispered a single word before collapsing into darkness. "Dad." The hallway outside suddenly erupted into chaos. A nurse burst through the door, pale and out of breath. "Doctor!" "The girl." The doctor spun around. "What happened?" The nurse looked directly at Elvis. Her voice shook. "She just woke up." A heavy silence filled the room. And the very first thing she asked was, she swallowed hard, "Where is my father?" The words hung in the air like thunder that refused to fade. "Where is my father?" For several endless seconds, nobody in the room breathed. The chief physician slowly turned toward Elvis. Neither man spoke. Neither needed to. The question the young girl had asked carried more weight than any answer either of them was prepared to hear. Elvis's fingers tightened around the unopened letter. Its faded paper trembled in his hands. Outside the hospital windows, the storm that had swallowed Memphis for hours was finally beginning to weaken. But inside those walls, a far greater storm had only just begun. The doctor opened the recovery room door. Machines hummed softly. Morning light, pale and gray, slipped through the curtains. The young girl lay weakly against the hospital pillow, her face still colorless but no longer lifeless. The blood transfusion had saved her. She slowly turned her head. Her tired eyes met Elvis's. For a moment, neither of them spoke. She simply stared at him, not as millions of fans had stared at the king of rock and roll. Not with excitement, not with admiration, but with quiet recognition, as if she had been searching for that face her entire life. Tears slowly filled her eyes. "You came," she whispered. Elvis stepped closer. "I couldn't leave you." She smiled faintly. "I knew you wouldn't." Those words struck him harder than any applause he had ever received. He pulled a chair beside her bed and gently sat down. For the first time in years, Elvis Presley had no idea what to say. The chief physician entered, carrying a thin medical folder. "I think both of you deserve to know what we discovered." He placed the file on the bedside table. "We completed additional genetic testing during the night." Elvis looked up. "So?" The doctor nodded slowly. "The blood match was not a coincidence." "Silence." "The genetic markers are consistent with a close biological relationship." He paused. "Our conclusion is that you are family." The room became perfectly still. The girl quietly closed her eyes. A single tear rolled down her cheek. Elvis remained frozen. His entire world seemed to stop turning. Family. One word. Yet it carried the weight of decades. With trembling hands, Elvis finally looked down at the faded envelope. Across its front, the familiar handwriting still read, "To Elvis, if we never meet again." He carefully broke the seal. The paper inside had yellowed with age. He unfolded it slowly. Every crease carried the weight of forgotten years. He began to read. "Elvis, if this letter ever reaches you, it means life finally found the courage that I never had. When we said goodbye all those years ago, I had already learned that I was carrying your child. I wanted to tell you, more than anything. But the world around you had become too loud. Your concerts became bigger. The crowds became endless. The cameras followed every step you took. I was afraid our child would never know peace if she entered that world. So I disappeared. Not because I stopped loving you, but because I loved our daughter enough to let her grow up away from the spotlight. If fate ever brings you together, please don't waste another moment. Love her the way I always knew you would." The letter ended with a single signature. "Emily." Elvis lowered the paper. His vision blurred. For years, he had believed Emily had simply vanished. He had searched. He had hired investigators. He had asked old friends. Nobody had ever found her. Now he finally understood why. She had never been hiding from him. She had been protecting their child. The young girl slowly reached beneath her hospital blanket. Around her neck hung a worn silver pendant shaped like a guitar pick. She unclasped it carefully. "I've worn this every day." She placed it in Elvis's hand. "Mom said," she struggled to steady her voice, "that if I ever found the man who gave me this, I'd know I'd found home." Elvis stared at the pendant. He remembered buying it from a tiny jewelry shop in Memphis before fame had changed everything. There had only ever been one. He had given it to Emily with a promise life had stolen from both of them. Unable to hold back any longer, Elvis gently took the girl's hand. "I'm so sorry." His voice broke. So many birthdays. So many Christmas mornings. So many moments. I wasn't there. She squeezed his hand. "You would have been, if you had known." The tears they had both held back finally came. Not the loud tears of heartbreak, but the quiet tears that appear when years of unanswered questions finally find their answers. A nurse quietly entered the room. "Mr. Presley." She hesitated. There is something you should probably see. She walked to the window. Outside, the rain had stopped. The clouds were opening. Across the street, thousands of people had gathered. The news had spread through Memphis before sunrise. The concert had been cancelled. Instead of demanding refunds, instead of expressing anger, the crowd stood in complete silence. Many held flowers. Some held candles. Others simply bowed their heads. No one shouted. No one complained. Someone in the crowd began softly singing. Can't help falling in love. One voice became 10. 10 became 100. Soon, thousands of strangers were singing together beneath the clearing sky. Not for a concert, not for entertainment, but for hope. The sound drifted through the hospital window. Soft, gentle, almost like a prayer. The young girls smiled. They're singing for you. Elvis slowly shook his head. No. He looked at her. They're singing for us. Several weeks later, the arena that had once expected the biggest concert in Memphis history finally filled again. This time, Elvis walked onto the stage with no cape, no grand entrance, no fireworks. He simply carried one folded letter in his hand. The audience rose to its feet before he spoke a single word. He looked across the sea of faces, then quietly said, "There was a night when I believed I missed the most important performance of my life." He smiled. I was wrong. He looked toward the front row. A healthy young girl smiled back at him. Beside her sat an empty chair. On that chair rested a single white rose. A tribute to Emily. The greatest performance, Elvis continued, was choosing a human life over applause. The arena became silent. So if you remember me for anything, I hope you don't remember the songs. I hope you remember that no dream, and no fame, and no stage is ever more important than saving one life. The applause that followed was unlike anything Elvis had ever heard. It wasn't loud because of fame. It was loud because 50,000 people had just witnessed the heart of a man they thought they already knew. Years later, people would tell many different versions of that rainy night in Memphis. Some remembered the cancelled concert. Some remembered the hospital. Some remembered the mysterious letter. But those who were there always agreed on one thing. The greatest moment in Elvis Presley's life was never the night he stood beneath the brightest spotlight. It was the night he walked away from one. Because on that stormy evening, he thought he was carrying a stranger into a hospital. Instead, he was carrying destiny back into his own arms. And sometimes, the loudest standing ovation in history is the one that happens after the music stops.